take a look at how we catch them now, okay? And I'm going to use the two extremes here, okay? Basically, the clear water, the green water in the spring, the warming water temperatures, 43 degrees and higher. Fish are more active at 43 degrees when it's spring, because when the water temperature is coming up, they get more active. If I'm fishing 43 after it dropped down to 43 in the fall or late winter, that's tougher fishing, right? But when you're coming up, like you might say 43 degrees, that's cold. Not when it's the spring, man, because those fish are like, oh, I got to feed. Mother Nature's moving them, right? So you've got these nice clear water conditions, then you got that nasty, stupid, muddy, chocolate milk, cold water, okay? So basically with the muddy water, here are my general recommendations for your presentations, okay? So we're not going to talk about specific lures yet. We're going to talk about the presentation itself, because that's critical in spring. First, whenever the water gets muddy, smallmouth bass start to look down to feed. When it gets muddy, they start to look down, okay? And so I'm going to look more to the bottom of the water column, on the bottom or just close to the bottom of the water, okay, when it gets muddy. When it's muddy water, I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to slow my presentations down. So drag that tube and let it sit. Throw it in behind that ledge, drag, let it sit. That's what we did here. Those baits, we downsized and we just dragged and let it sit, talking, drag it, almost fishing it like bait. I mean, those fish did not want to expend much energy. So slow it down. Dark colors, obviously, everybody knows that. You want to contrast it in muddy water, black and blue, red and black, those kind of contrasting colors with dark water. Appeal to their lateral line with their presentations. What does that mean? If I'm using soft plastics, I'm putting a rattle in there, right? If I'm using a crankbait, I've got a rattle in the thing. Wide wobble crankbaits, too, are better because they basically throw out more vibration to the fish, your spinner baits and stuff like that. So appeal to the lateral line of the fish. Use sense. It's not because, they're not like catfish. Smallmouth are not catfish. They're not going to feed on, like, sensing the, smelling the water, so to speak, like a catfish will. But what they do is that the bite backs off a notch, right? They'll be neutral or negative, and so they might pick something up and just mouth it and then just drop it. They're not even using their suction sometimes when it's like that. They're just clamping down on that bait. And what I'm trying to do with my sense is I put paste on there, like a little wand and stuff, that sticks to it. But all I'm trying to do is get them to hold on to it longer, maybe ingest it a little bit more. And being on the water as much as I am, I see a big difference. When I start to feel that really little light pickup and I can't get anything, I'm pulling and I got a piece of my plastics off. The fish probably has it in their mouth. I know I got to do something different. A lot of baits are scented nowadays, but it definitely will improve your bite, improve your hookup ratio, even if you just move to a paste and put some paste on there, okay? And then frequent stops and starts in muddy water, so drag the tube. Crankbait, stop and go, stop and go. But when what you don't want to do is erratic action. This jerking around and all this stuff. You might get a reaction bite. Sometimes I resort to that in muddy water. But, a lot of movement, side-to-side movement, stuff like that, not necessarily the best thing, in muddy water. So that's muddy water. Now when we flip over to the other side, clear water, I go more to the middle of the water column, because usually your baits can fish faster. Usually the fish are more active at that time, right? Medium, maybe even fast retrieves, fast speed of the bait coming towards me. Natural colors, obviously. With smallmouth, I don't get real specific on colors. One of the things with that is, I think as long as you're in the ballpark, you're close. So if your crayfish are brown in your river, or your crayfish are blue tinted like they are in the Susquehanna River, use that in clear water, but I don't get real specific about my colors. And if your bait fish are brown on top and white on the bottom, do that with your baits, okay? If you're going to mimic a bait fish. So appeal to the sight feeder by natural colors, natural movements. Obviously, if you're using a jerk bait, that darting is nice, right? In that clear water, and the fish are going to be more active, more aggressive. And then natural movements like the crayfish, drag, crawling along the bottom, trying not to be noticed kind of thing. And then erratic actions, again, are sometimes okay in the clear water because the fish are, they're sight feeders and they'll move more. Their strike zone's bigger, so you can move the bait a little bit more and get in front of more fish too. I try to fish as fast as I can, given the conditions. If conditions mean I need to slow down to catch fish, I'll slow down to a crawl pace, right? But if I can speed up, I'm going to speed up because I can cover more water. So let's talk about specific baits. Some of my baits I use, in high muddy water. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. I'm just trying to give you guys kind of this little toolkit of things that you can expand on and cross over and use try different things, you know. I think more importantly, those general rules, that, you know, those general guidelines for your presentations are probably more important than the specific bait you're using. Crankbaits, so crankbaits with wide wobbles and rattles inside of them, you know, and I mentioned the color, you know, blacks and reds and stuff like this. This is one of my favorite, you know, muddy water crankbaits on the Susquehanna and Juniata River. It's red and black color. This one actually happens to be a shallow diver. I probably wouldn't do that behind that ledge, right? I need something that's going to dive down. I try to use a crankbait that's going to dive a foot or two deeper than my water here that I'm fishing, because I want it, and again, remember, muddy, get it on the bottom. So I want this thing to be down behind this ledge, just grinding rock, and then I can pause it, grind rock, grind along, I can pause it like that. So crankbaits are good with rattles in them, wide wobbles. Spinnerbaits, one of my favorite spinnerbaits is for muddy water. It's this one. It's a black spinnerbait made by Winco's Custom Lures, and he makes these for me. And basically, it's got a Colorado blade, got a short arm on here. You know, if you look at some of the research that they do on baits and especially spinnerbaits, they feel like the arm is what kind of puts out the vibration to the fish. And if you think about the long arm spinnerbaits, what the wire's more flexible, right? It's not as tight. You think about when you talk on those little Dixie cups with the string. If it's loose and I talk, can you hear me, Rick Polly? No? When you stretch it out and make it tight, you can hear. So this thing is like, it's shorter, it's stiffer, and it can toss out the vibration better. And then, of course, black. I put a trailer on to make a bigger profile, easier for the fish to see. So anything I need to do to make it so the fish can see it better in the muddy water. But what I'm really doing is just basically slow rolling this thing and bumping it off stuff on the bottom. I'm just trying to bump it off the bottom stuff. I'll pause it, get it going again, and just so I can feel that bait crawling through that rock, and I can just barely feel that blade pumping.
So you have to have a somewhat heavy bait to do that, right?
Yeah, it's depending on flow. You know. This one I think is probably half ounce or so. Yep. You can see it's bumped a lot of rock because all the black paint's gone. So, actually won a tournament with this one last year, so it's my favorite one. I travel everywhere with it. Plastic crawfish imitations. Obviously, in muddy water, if the fish are looking down, one of the favorite foods of smallmouth is what? Crayfish, right? I mean, in most rivers, you got bait fish and crayfish. I mean, you got all kinds of bugs, but that's pretty much your two profiles right there, pretty much, right? So, you know, a crawfish like this, I've got a nice little sled style weight on this thing. It's called a flutter head, and I can drag this really slow with real confidence. It's not going to get caught in the rock. Let it sit. You know, if I'm throwing it in behind these bridge pilings like this one here, I'm just banging it against the bridge piling. I'm dragging it out, let it sit, drag it out, let it sit, pull it back in, throw it out again. So I'm really just letting it sit a lot. It's hard, and it's hard for me, honestly. Like I like to fish probably medium speed. And you know, like it's kind of funny because I go fishing with one buddy's guide. We call it kayak fishermen in a jet boat trip in the wintertime. And my buddy, it's the guide. I mean, he fishes at a blazing pace, even in the wintertime. And Jeff Little's with us too, and he fishes it's like a glacier watching him fish. So it's like watching a glacier, you know, roll through the valley. And me, I'm kind of in the middle of that. You know what I mean? I'm kind of one of those guys that's in the middle. But make sure you're pulling it and letting it set. Real important in that muddy water, I think, to just let that bait set. This is going to have some action. You know, the claws are going to have some action. A lot of guys think you got to do something all the time with your bait. You don't. The other thing, I'm going to give you a little, this is a kind of a good tip here, a good trick. Swim baits, you guys all know soft swim baits, right? I wouldn't use this color in the mud. I use something that's dark, real smoke color, black color, something like that, or dark brown. But a lot of guys will swim, swim the swim bait, right? You swim it, slow, fast, hop it, or whatever you're doing with it, a lot of stuff. What we do with this is we drag it like tubes. So sometimes what I find is the fish, when we're in cold water, high muddy water, we're dragging the crayfish. This is just kind of I don't feel like the bite is happening the way it should. I feel like the fish just aren't into the bait. And it's hard for me to describe that. Like the bite's not as aggressive. Maybe they're mouthing it, dragging it off, and I'm pulling them, I'm not getting them. Sometimes they're not on the crayfish profile, they're on the fish profile in the spring. And so what I do is I switch to the swim bait, and I drag it like a tube. I just throw it in behind that ledge, let it sink the bottom, I drag it like a tube. I know it's contrary to everything everybody kind of thinks about, but again, this paddle tail's up there doing its thing. And if you think about bait fish, when the water cools real fast, what do? They tend to go, I spent a lot of times as a kid, man, 40 years of looking at fish and stuff in the creeks by my house, right across the road from where I grew up. And then when it gets cold, they'll go down the bottom, and they're just kind of that head down, just kind of in a daze kind of thing. And I think that's why this is like kind of the easy meal. Remember, pre-spawn, female smallmouth, looking to feed up, but they're looking to conserve that energy. Okay, and so that this bait can work really good for you.
Is that on the same kind of hook?
Yeah, it's basically a heavy one. This is like a 4 ounce. Yep. Okay. Yeah, I use these a lot, the flutter heads that Winco's makes, because they're really, I mean, they avoid the snags like crazy. So in the clear side of things, I'm a big fan of the suspended jerk baits in spring and clear water, because you can do a lot with them. If you need to be a little bit more aggressive and the fish will let you work it faster, you can do that. One of the things that I find, though, is that the do-nothing approach a lot of times works really good with these things. So remember, those fish are in here, or they're just not in the billy water, but just inside the billy water a lot of time right here. And a lot of times I'll throw that suspended jerk bait, like the LC 100s and 78s, throw it in here, crank it down, and I just let it kind of swing out to that edge right there, and just doing nothing, they'll hit it. I was on the Juniata River about 6 years ago. The kid was fishing a ledge just like this next to a spawning area, just like that. And the kid was standing there, and I was on the bank, and I kind of walked up. I got on my kayak, walked up by him. His fishing wasn't catching anything. Not at all. He was just fishing a suspended jerkbait. And he was doing this and doing this and doing this. And I said to him, why don't you just, actually I caught a fish first. So I went there, I'm like, hey, you mind if I fish with you? Plenty of room in there, so I threw in. I kind of actually wanted to help him out a little bit. So I threw it, boom, caught the fish. And that kid caught like a 19 after he stopped doing anything. He just stopped doing anything with the bait. And he caught like a 19, an 18. I mean, I was like taking pictures of the kid. I mean, the kid was just like, just in heaven, man, in heaven. So sometimes doing nothing with those suspending jerk baits is better than doing a bunch of stuff with it. Spinner baits, change color, chartreuse, white, go to willow blades, go in the middle of the water column, maybe just slow roll it, maybe pulling it up or dropping it real slow, stuff like that. And then lipless crankbaits. I think that's where a lot of river anglers go wrong. They kind of avoid using lipless crankbaits in early spring, and I know that I've had tremendous luck on those for years and years and years. You don't have to get fancy. Silver and black back, gold and black, if you want to, black and red. And a lot of times with those, sometimes I can just crank it real slow. But I also do the pull and drop with it. I just throw it in behind that ledge there, right in behind the ledge, pull it up, let it drop, you can feel it doing this, and it flutters down. And I think with the early spring smallmouth, it's pretty aggressive kind of bait, but I think it's a trigger. So sometimes actually when I'm not catching anything, and fishing seems really tough, I throw that on and start throwing it, and it seems like it works. So those are the baits, that I think an arsenal that you should have together if you're going to do some early spring pre-spawn smallmouth bass fishing. So let's kind of switch gears, because I want to get some of the musky stuff